Secretary Murphy, thanks so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
I wanted to start off by asking, I'm giving you a magic wand for 2015 Delaware education. What are the one or two things you'd really like to get done this year?
Absolutely continue to make the strides that we have been making in recent years. And just in recent years, we have more than doubled the number of children who are ages birth to 5 who are getting great services during those early years. We have continued to raise student achievement throughout the entire state with more kids showing great academic gains, 10,000 more kids reaching proficiency. We have seen great gains in our high schools with our 9th graders being more and more successful. We've doubled the number of students in advanced placement classes who are being successful in those classes. And we are seeing more of our students make that choice to go on to post-secondary education and be successful in college. And so really this is about continuing the great work that we have started, and so much of that is about implementing the work that we have committed to. And more specifically, when we look at the work that educators are doing this year, their implementation of assessments, of curriculum, and of the way that they teach in alignment with the Common Core standards is critical for our students. Our teachers have been working on this for years, and they will continue to work on it and focus on it this year. It is a very high priority for us. Secondly, we have seen a tremendous focus in recent years on the quality of the teachers in the classroom and the quality of the school leaders. And we will continue to focus on it, providing the best possible supports for our teachers and school leaders. And finally, third, we need to make sure that we are taking care of our students who are attending schools that are struggling. We have 2,000 students in our state right now who are attending 6 of our priority schools. And right now we are focused on ensuring that those schools are on the best possible trajectory to serve their children.
I want to ask about Race to the Top, something you've been involved with even before you were in this position. It seems like we're kind of in that wind down phase, and it's a chance to reflect. I want to ask you, of all the initiatives that have come out of this money, what's worked that you really wouldn't want to see the state continue to invest in? What hasn't worked?
That's a great question. So first, let's go back a few years and remind ourselves that originally this was all about Delawareans coming together and saying, what do we need for our children? And we saw districts and educators come together and name what those things were. So for example, our children in Cesar Rodney may need help with 9th grade, and so Cesar Rodney started a 9th grade academy. Right? In other districts we saw we need help with recruiting the best possible teachers, and we saw them focus on that. And so as we move forward to this next chapter, we're doing the same exact thing. Asking our educators and districts what is most important, what has worked, what has not worked. And that is how we guide our investments. So first and foremost, we hear that continued support for moving to rigorous standards, things like the next generation science standards and the Common Core standards, incredibly important. And so we are moving forward with supporting them this year and have committed to continuing to support next year. We also hear over and over that our teachers and our principals are incredibly important for our students, those educators, the core educators in the school. And so continuing to focus on preparing the best teachers, recruiting and selecting the teachers, as we have now a statewide teacher recruitment portal. As we look at inducting them, mentoring them in those early years so that they have successful first few years of teaching. And as we look at high quality evaluation practices and career ladder opportunities for teachers, that is work that we are continuing. And so when we assess Race to the Top, it is really about saying what's the next chapter for Delaware, and that chapter is built squarely on the work that we have done over the last 4 years and the successes that we have seen.
Back in the original application stage, there was all these ambitious goals, and they were specific. 60% on the 4th grade math on the NAEP test would be proficient. The latest numbers we had, I think, from 2013 are where I think we're at 42%. You can go down the list, and it's a similar story. We've made gains, but we haven't sort of gotten close to meeting these really ambitious goals. So I guess I want to ask you, did Race to the Top not work as well as expected, or were these goals sort of meant to be off in the distance, almost unrealistic, unreasonable in a way?
We are all committed to continuing to accelerate the achievement gains. I think it is, those goals are important. It is important that our children reach a level of proficiency in academics where they are ready to be successful beyond high school. And so those goals, while we have not reached all of them, we are excited about the progress we're making, but we're also acting with urgency to continue that progress. And we have seen progress, and we see it every single day in our schools, and we certainly see it year over year. And in fact, a study came out last year talking about even a longer-term trajectory for Delaware, and Delaware is the third fastest improving state in terms of academic achievement over the last 2 decades. So we are seeing long-term growth, and we're seeing short-term gains. I think what's most critical is that we are continuing to accelerate those gains. Our students depend on us for that.
But I want to get back to the specifics of these goals. I mean, someone could look at this and say, this is what we were supposed to accomplish through Race to the Top. We didn't accomplish this. Race to the Top doesn't work. I guess I want to give you the opportunity to offer a counter narrative. Maybe it wasn't about reaching those goals. I mean, what do I say to someone who comes to me and says, look, they didn't hit any of these check marks?
What you should say is that first and foremost, let's not shy away from student achievement. The core work that we're doing is to drive student achievement gains. That's why we're here. That's why we have jobs. That's why we come to work. Right? But also, let's note that what the work of Race to the Top was moving forward with many different supports for our students. And a lot of that work had to do with what do our children need now, what do our educators need now? Let's provide those supports. Then let's ask, as we move through the Race to the Top years, what is continuing to work, what is not working, what worked and doesn't need to be continued? And those are the core questions that we are asking. I don't want to shy away from the student achievement. That's incredibly important. That should be the core of all of our work. But at the same time, we need to say that many of the efforts that we saw our educators and our communities engage in recent years, those efforts are working, and we will continue those efforts. This is not about saying whether Race to the Top was a success or a failure. This is about saying what is the next chapter for Delaware and how do we continue to serve our children.
While we're on the topic of federal initiatives, of course you know there's a grand debate going on in Congress right now about No Child Left Behind, what to do with this law, including whether or not we should keep the federal testing mandate. I'm not really asking for you to take a position on that. I want you to try to explain for the folks here in Delaware what the impact could be here as that debate unfolds in Washington.
I actually think that the impact here is less significant maybe than other states, and that is because Delaware has made incredible progress in recent years on many of the areas that we have cared about here that happen to coincide and with the areas that we hear being starting to be talked about in Congress, and certainly hear from the Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan. And so as we look at the next chapter, let's talk about a couple of important points with ESEA reauthorization and that potential. The first is that we need to maintain the focus as a country on high standards for our children. The Common Core standards are an example of college and career readiness standards. Other states are using other standards, and that's fine for them. They've made that choice. But here in Delaware, we're committed to those high standards, and we as a country should be committed to those high standards. Second is that we have been successful in recent years as a country in focusing on our educators and trying to help and support them to make sure that the systems around them are in place to make sure that they have what they need to be successful in their classrooms. And we should not lose focus as a country because we know that the educators in our classrooms are the most important factor for our children. Third, we have seen a continued focus in recent years, and it needs to continue as a country, in ensuring that all of our children attend schools that are successfully serving them. Right now, that is most specifically our priority schools work here in Delaware, but we are committed to that work as a state, and that is about all of our schools. Right? We do not need the federal government to tell us to focus on high standards, to focus on great teachers and leaders, or to focus on our lowest performing schools. Those are things that we here in Delaware are committed to. And as it pertains to the testing, I would like to address that directly. Sure. Those assessments, those yearly assessments, as I said before, they provide an academic checkup for students, information for parents, how is my child moving along, information for educators in the school communities, and information for policymakers. We need to be able to allocate resources in the best possible way for the students who need them most. And that yearly checkup, that yearly assessment provides that information. And it has helped us as a country to move forward in recent years and make better resource and policy decisions.
I want to ask, before we have to wrap up, about charter school accountability. In recent weeks, you guys have had two significant court victories against charter schools that were slated for closure, including one that had a sort of, I don't know if you call it successful, but was able to get an injunction this time last year. Do those victories for you guys set a precedent that allows you now to be more aggressive about how you police the charter sector? I know there's a new framework in place, and there's always been talk about sort of being really rigorous about accountability. Now, do you think the path is clear to really do that?
Charter school accountability is incredibly important, and I actually think the precedent was set multiple years ago. We committed as a state to the academic performance framework, to the organizational framework, for the financial framework for charters. And all of our charters know that that is how they will be evaluated. Right? And that evaluation at the end of the day is about running a great school and delivering great educational results for kids. We made that commitment years ago. And now what we are doing is we are making good on that commitment. We are acting. We are renewing charters or holding them accountable based on their performance with their children. And so as we look at moving forward in Delaware, I think that is an incredibly important step that we need to continue to move forward on. All of our children should know that when they attend a school, that school will be successful. And part of that effort is around accountability. And this charter school component in recent months that you have seen is all about ensuring that our students attend schools that are successful.
Well, Secretary Murphy, I want to thank you so much for joining us, and look forward to following you in the future.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity.